In the hushed corridors of the Cairo Museum, a single parchment lay hidden for centuries. An ancient map revealed the resting place of the Golden Pharaoh. No one knew of its existence until a young Egyptologist named Leila stumbled upon it in the museum's archives. By the flickering light of an oil lamp, she traced the faint, almost ghostly lines, a winding path that began in the heart of the Nile and disappeared into the sands of time. The map's delicate script spoke of a tomb untouched by looters, a place of eternal rest for a pharaoh who had never been recorded in any of the dynasty's chronicles. Leila felt a chill as she whispered the name etched into the parchment, Setepenre, the pharaoh of the lost sun. Her heart pounded with a mix of fear and wonder. She remembered the tales her grandmother used to tell of golden sarcophagi buried so deep in the earth that even the gods themselves had forgotten. Was this the same pharaoh whose name was spoken only in secret? She pressed the fragile map to her chest and closed her eyes, feeling the weight of centuries settle around her. The next morning, Leila met with her mentor, Professor Farid, a man whose eyes had seen more ruins than most could imagine. He was a keeper of forgotten truths, a quiet scholar who spoke in riddles. When she showed him the map, he grew pale and silent. This should not exist, he murmured, fingers trembling. The tomb of Setepenre was said to be cursed. Those who disturb it will awaken the wrath of the desert. Leila's resolve only hardened. She had always believed that history was more than dust and broken statues. It was alive, and the tomb was calling to her. That night, as the stars blazed over the Nile, she packed her satchel, a worn journal, a brass compass, a small canteen of water. Her dreams were haunted by the voice of the pharaoh, echoing in the darkness. "Find me," it whispered. "Uncover the truth that was buried in sand and silence." The journey to the tomb would take her far from the safety of Cairo, deep into the dunes of the western desert, where no light had touched the earth for millennia. There, beneath a sun that never slept, the secrets of the Golden Pharaoh lay waiting. By dawn, Leila had gathered what few trusted companions she could. Omar, the desert guide, whose eyes were as sharp as a hawk's, and Yasmin, her childhood friend, who had grown up with the shifting sands as her playground. Together, they loaded their camels with provisions and maps, each step forward a promise to the past. The caravan set out from the edges of the city, the last flickers of Cairo's light fading behind them. The dunes rose like ancient gods, their golden crests whispering secrets to the wind. Leila's fingers tightened around the map, its cryptic symbols both a guide and a warning. As they traveled deeper into the desert, the rhythm of the camels' hooves became a steady chant, a heartbeat in the emptiness. The sky above was a tapestry of cobalt and gold, and the air shimmered with heat. Leila felt the weight of every grain of sand, as if the desert itself watched and judged their every step. Omar led them with an unerring sense of direction, his face a mask of calm. He spoke little, but his eyes missed nothing. The movement of a distant mirage, the soft hiss of the wind over the dunes. Yasmin, ever the optimist, tried to lighten the mood with stories of spirits who danced in the desert night. But even she grew quiet when the first signs of something ancient began to appear. Half-buried stone markers, their inscriptions worn down to a single word. Setepenre, like a whispered prayer to the past. By nightfall, they camped beneath the cool glow of the stars. Leila spread the map on the sand, tracing the path they would take at dawn. The air was thick with anticipation, and the crackling of the fire seemed to echo in the silence. Do you think it's real?" Yasmin asked softly, her voice almost lost in the wind. "The tomb, the pharaoh." Leila closed her eyes, feeling the weight of every story, every myth that had ever been told of the Golden Pharaoh. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I have to see it with my own eyes. I have to know." The desert was a realm of endless possibility and endless peril. In the darkness beyond their campfire, Leila thought she saw a flicker of movement, a shadow that vanished when she turned her head. She told herself it was only the wind. But deep down, she felt that they were no longer alone. The dawn would bring them closer to the tomb, closer to the truth that waited in silence beneath the dunes. And though the journey had just begun, Leila knew that some secrets were not meant to be uncovered, but she had already chosen her path. At first light, the desert was a vast ocean of gold, and their caravan moved like a single breath across its endless waves. The coolness of the night had fled, replaced by a merciless sun that blazed from a sky without mercy. Leila's scarf was drawn tight around her face, but the heat pressed against her skin like an unspoken warning. For hours, they traveled in near silence, each of them lost in their thoughts. The map was their only guide, and Leila clung to it as though it were a lifeline. Omar's keen eyes scanned the horizon, watching for any sign of the landmarks. The ancient map described a rock shaped like a lion's head, a valley carved by forgotten rivers. By midday, they reached the first of the markers, a solitary stone pillar, its surface etched with hieroglyphs, half buried in drifting sand. Leila ran her fingers over the symbols, feeling the language of a world that had long since vanished. Setepenre. She whispered the name like a secret on her tongue. Omar knelt beside her, his voice low. "This is the sign," he said. "Beyond this, we leave the world of the living and enter the world of the dead." Leila swallowed her fear. The path ahead was one of both promise and peril. She could almost hear the sands whispering around them voices that spoke of glory and of ruin. They pressed on deeper into the dunes. The landscape shifted with each gust of wind, reshaping itself in an endless dance. More than once they lost sight of the pillar, the desert conspiring to erase all traces of their passing. But Leila's determination never wavered. She would not let the sands consume her purpose. That night, they camped at the edge of a deep ravine, its walls carved with ancient symbols that glowed faintly in the starlight. Yasmin traced the carvings with reverent fingers. "These are older than anything we've seen," she murmured, as if the pharaoh's story was carved into the bones of the earth itself. As they huddled around the fire, Leila felt a presence in the air, something that watched them from the darkness beyond. She thought of the old tales of desert spirits of jinn who guarded the secrets of the pharaohs. The night was alive with voices, the soft sigh of the wind, the distant howl of a jackal, and something deeper still, a whisper that came from the sand itself. "Do you hear it?" she asked Omar, her voice trembling. He nodded slowly. "The desert remembers everything. Even the dead cannot escape its memory." Leila lay awake long after the others had slept, staring up at the cold brilliance of the stars. In her dreams, she saw the pharaoh's golden mask, its eyes filled with both promise and warning. And when she woke, she knew that the next day would bring them to the heart of the tomb and to whatever truths lay buried there. By dawn, the ravine's shadows had faded, replaced by a pale light, that felt almost merciful after the night's unsettling dreams. Leila rose before the others, her fingers tracing the carvings once more, as though she could draw strength from the ancient stone. Omar readied the camels, their breath steaming in the cool morning air. Yasmin's face was pale, but determined, her hand clutching the small silver amulet she always wore. They all felt it, the weight of the unknown, pressing down like the sun above. The map spoke of a hidden pass, a gateway that would lead them to the tomb's entrance. For hours they searched, following the faintest clues, a shadow that lingered where it should not, a line of stones half buried in drifting sand. The desert seemed to shift around them, each dune a puzzle they had to solve. At last they found it, a narrow cleft in the earth, almost invisible until they stood before it. It was a place of silence and shadow, the air cooler and stiller, as though the wind itself dared not intrude. Leila stepped forward, her breath catching in her throat. The entrance was framed by towering stone slabs, each etched with hieroglyphs, so old their meanings had been lost. But she recognized one symbol, the Eye of Horus, the promise of protection, and the warning of judgment. Omar lit a torch, the flame flickering in the darkness. "This is the threshold," he said quietly. "Beyond this, we are no longer in the world we know." The passage was narrow, the walls closing around them like the throat of some great beast. Their footsteps echoed softly, each sound a reminder that they were trespassing in a place meant to remain untouched. As they walked deeper, the air grew cool and still. The smell of ancient earth filled their lungs, and the flickering torchlight revealed faded paintings on the walls, processions of priests' offerings of lotus flowers and gold, and the face of the pharaoh, serene and eternal. Leila could almost feel his gaze upon her, a presence that transcended time. The air seemed to hum with energy, as if the past was stirring in the darkness. She reached out to touch the painted face, her fingers brushing against the cool stone. A sudden gust of wind rushed down the passage, extinguishing their torch in an instant. They stood in darkness, the silence absolute. Yasmin let out a soft cry, her hand gripping Leila's arm. "What was that?" she whispered. Leila forced her breath to steady. "The desert testing us," she said, though she did not truly believe it. She fumbled with the flint, striking it, until the torch flared back to life. The flame revealed something new. A doorway carved into the rock, its lintel cracked and worn by centuries. Above it, the symbol of a golden sun, Setepenre's sign. Leila's heart raced. "This is it," she whispered. "The entrance to the pharaoh's tomb." Beyond the doorway lay darkness, deeper than any they had known. But it was a darkness that promised answers, and perhaps the final rest of a king whose name had been lost to all but the sands. With trembling hands, Leila pushed open the ancient door. It groaned on its stone hinges, a sound like the sigh of the earth itself. The air that rushed out was cool and heavy, thick with the scent of centuries undisturbed. Torchlight revealed a small antechamber, its walls covered in faded frescoes. Figures danced across the stone priests in flowing robes, offerings of gold and incense, and at the center, the Golden Pharaoh himself, Setepenre, his features serene beneath the weight of eternity. Yasmin let out a slow breath. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice reverent. Omar stepped forward, his footsteps careful. "This place, it's been waiting for us." He ran his fingers over the carved walls, tracing the stories they told a kingdom forgotten by time. a ruler who had chosen to vanish into legend. In the flickering light, the painting seemed almost alive. Leila could feel the weight of the pharaoh's gaze watching them as they trespassed in his eternal rest. Her heart pounded with equal parts wonder and fear. At the far end of the chamber stood a statue of the pharaoh, a figure in gold leaf and obsidian eyes, its hands crossed in the eternal sign of kingship. It seemed to radiate a quiet power, the air around it charged with a presence that was both regal and forbidding. Leila approached it, her hand outstretched. Setepenre, she murmured, her voice echoing in the silent room. She almost expected the statue to answer, to come to life, and speak the secrets it had guarded for so long. Instead, the silence deepened a hush that felt like the world itself was holding its breath. Suddenly, Omar's voice broke through the stillness. "Look!" He pointed to a narrow doorway behind the statue, half concealed by drifts of sand. Another passage. Leila felt a thrill of fear and excitement. The map had spoken of hidden chambers of traps and tests for those who dared to enter. She swallowed hard, her resolve hardening. "We have to go on," she said. "This is only the beginning." With the torch held high, they stepped through the hidden doorway. The air grew colder, the darkness pressing closer around them. The corridor sloped gently downward, the walls covered in more hieroglyphs. Prayers to the gods, warnings to the living. Yasmin shivered. "It feels different here," she said softly, "as if the tomb itself is watching us." Leila nodded. "We're entering the heart of the pharaoh's world. His secrets are close now." They walked on in silence, the only sound the soft crunch of sand beneath their feet. The torch flickered and swayed, throwing long shadows that seemed to dance along the walls. At last they reached a second chamber, larger, more ornate. Columns rose like silent sentinels, their surfaces carved with scenes of the pharaoh's triumphs and conquests. In the center lay a stone sarcophagus, its lid untouched, the golden sun of Setepenre glimmering in the flickering light. Leila's breath caught in her throat. Here at last was the pharaoh's resting place, and with it, the promise of everything she had sought. Knowledge power, and perhaps something even deeper. She stepped forward, her hand hovering over the ancient stone. The air seemed to hum with energy, as though the pharaoh himself waited just beyond the veil of time. "Are you ready?" Omar asked, his voice hushed. Leila met his gaze. "I have to be," she said. And with that, she laid her hand on the sarcophagus, feeling the weight of centuries beneath her fingertips. As Leila's hand touched the cool stone of the sarcophagus, the room seemed to grow even quieter, as if the desert itself were listening. She could feel the weight of the centuries in her bones, a silent testament to the pharaoh's final rest. The hieroglyphs carved along the sarcophagus shimmered in the torchlight, a silent prayer to the gods. She traced the symbols, her fingers trembling. Setepenre. She whispered the name, a promise and a warning. Yasmin stood close behind her, her breath caught in her throat. "Do you think he's really here?" "After all these centuries," Leila nodded slowly. "I believe he is, and I believe he's waiting." Omar stepped forward, his lantern casting long shadows. "We should be careful. The old stories say that the tombs of kings are guarded by more than just stone and sand." Leila swallowed hard, her eyes fixed on the carved seal in the center of the sarcophagus. It was a perfect circle of gold, inlaid with lapis lazuli and turquoise, a sun disk encircled by serpents. She recognized the symbol from the map, the final seal of the Golden Pharaoh. Taking a deep breath, she pressed her fingers against the seal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a faint grinding sound, the seal shifted beneath her hand. The lid of the sarcophagus shivered just a hair's breadth, but enough to know that it could be moved. A rush of cold air escaped, carrying with it the scent of ancient incense and something deeper, the perfume of eternity. Leila's heart raced. She glanced at Omar and Yasmin. "Help me," she said. Together they pushed against the heavy stone lid. Muscles strained, breath came in ragged gasps. Inch by inch, the lid slid aside, revealing the darkness within. For a moment, none of them moved. The torchlight flickered over the figure within a golden mask, serene and beautiful, resting upon a body wrapped in linen, so old it had turned to dust. The air around it shimmered with a strange stillness, as if time itself had paused to bear witness. Yasmin let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "He's beautiful," she murmured, "even in death." Leila felt her own breath catch. The pharaoh's mask was a work of art, crafted of gold and inlaid with precious stones, its features calm and eternal. In that moment, she understood the devotion of those who had created it. This was no mere burial, it was a promise to the gods and to the future. Omar's voice was low reverent. "Setepenre Pharaoh of the lost sun," he said softly. "May your journey beyond be as glorious as your life." Leila closed her eyes, feeling the weight of what they had uncovered. The map had brought them here, but it was only the beginning. The pharaoh's secrets, his true story, still lay hidden in the darkness. She took a slow breath. "We have to find the burial chamber," she said. This is just the antechamber of his soul." Omar nodded, his face solemn. "Then let us go deeper," he said. "The pharaoh's final truth awaits us." With a final glance at the golden mask, they turned away from the sarcophagus. In the shadows beyond, another passage opened its walls covered in symbols that spoke of trials and guardians. The tomb was not just a resting place. It was a labyrinth of the pharaoh's mind, a final testament to his power. And as they stepped into the darkness, they knew that the sands of time had only just begun to whisper their secrets. The passage beyond the burial chamber was narrow and steep, each step down a silent testament to the world they had chosen to enter. The torch flickered and sputtered, sending long shadows dancing across the ancient walls. Hieroglyphs glowed faintly in the darkness, their meanings lost to time, but their warnings as clear as the desert sky. Leila's heart beat fast in her chest. She could feel it, the presence of something old, something waiting. The air grew colder with each step, the stillness almost suffocating. Yasmin stayed close, her hand gripping her amulet, as if it alone could protect her from the tomb's quiet menace. Omar led the way, his footsteps sure and deliberate. "This is the pharaoh's test," he said softly. "Only those who prove themselves worthy may see his final resting place." They emerged into a larger chamber, its walls carved with images of the afterlife. The figures of Anubis and Osiris watched them with eyes of stone, and the ceiling was painted to resemble the night sky stars of gold that gleamed like frozen fire. In the center of the room stood a statue of Setepenre, towering and regal, carved from obsidian that drank the light. His eyes were inlaid with lapis, and his hands held a staff and an ankh, the symbols of life and death. Leila stepped forward. Her breath caught in her throat. She could almost hear the pharaoh's voice whispering from the darkness. "Prove yourself, seeker. The dead do not give up their secrets easily." Beneath the statue's feet, the floor was etched with a labyrinthine pattern, a puzzle of stone and shadow. Yasmin knelt to study it, her fingers tracing the worn lines. "It's a path," she said. "A journey of the soul. If we choose wrong, we'll be lost." Omar nodded. "These are the trials of the tomb. They were meant to guard the pharaoh's secrets and to keep out the unworthy." Leila's mind raced. She had studied ancient texts, deciphered forgotten scripts. But here, in the flickering light of the tomb, knowledge felt like a fragile shield. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, listening to the silence. "The path is not just a puzzle," she said finally. "It's a story. The pharaoh's story, his journey through the afterlife. We have to walk it as he would have." Step by step, they moved through the chamber, following the labyrinth's winding path. Each turn was a prayer, each step a promise. The walls seemed to close in around them, the air heavy with centuries of stillness. At the final turn, they found a door carved with the image of the sun, the symbol of Setepenre's reign. Leila's heart leapt. She reached out to touch it, and the stone felt warm beneath her fingers, as if the pharaoh's spirit still lingered there. Omar placed his hand over hers. "Are you ready?" he asked. Leila met his gaze, her voice steady. "I am. We've come too far to turn back." Together they pushed open the door. A gust of cold air swept past them, carrying with it the faint scent of myrrh and ancient incense. Beyond lay darkness and the final mystery of the Golden Pharaoh. As they stepped through the threshold, Leila felt a shiver run down her spine. The tomb was alive with memories, and each step forward was a journey deeper into the heart of a legend. The door closed behind them with a quiet finality, sealing them in a darkness so complete it seemed to swallow even their breath. Leila's torch flickered weakly, its light fighting against the shadows that crowded around them. The silence was a living thing, pressing close to their ears, filling their hearts with the echo of every step. The chamber was vast, its walls lost in the gloom. Leila felt a chill seep into her bones as she moved forward, each footstep a whisper against the ancient stone. Columns rose from the floor, like the trunks of ancient trees, their surfaces carved with scenes of triumph and of judgment. Yasmin moved closer to Leila, her voice a hushed tremor. "This place, it feels like it's watching us." Leila nodded. "It is. This is the pharaoh's final test, the place where he judged those who entered his realm." Omar raised his lantern, its light revealing a series of murals along the walls. They were older than any Leila had ever seen the paint, still vibrant despite the centuries. Figures moved through the painted scenes, priests and warriors, the pharaoh himself, and a figure cloaked in shadows, its face hidden in darkness. Leila's breath caught. "The guardian," she whispered. "The final keeper of the pharaoh's secrets." They moved deeper into the chamber, the air growing colder, each breath forming a faint mist. The murals told a story, the journey of the pharaoh's soul through the underworld. Each trial faced each demon vanquished. At the far end of the room, a dais rose from the floor, and upon it sat a figure, a statue, or a mummy. It was impossible to tell in the wavering light. Its face was hidden behind a mask of jet and gold, the eyes empty hollows that seemed to see into their very souls. Omar stepped forward, his voice low and steady. "We must pay our respects. This is the final guardian, the voice of the pharaoh in the darkness." Leila knelt, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt the weight of every moment, every breath she had taken to bring her here. "Setepenre," she whispered, "we seek only to honor your memory, to learn the truth you took with you into the darkness." For a moment there was only silence. Then a whisper in the darkness, a breath of wind or something more. The air seemed to thrum with power, and the shadows around the figure seemed to shift and dance. Yasmin clutched Leila's arm. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice trembling. Leila nodded, her own fear, a quiet, steady thing in her chest. "He's here," she said. "He's listening." She stepped forward, her fingers brushing against the cold stone of the dais. In that instant, she felt a surge of something, not heat, but a pulse of life, a memory that had waited centuries to be seen. The pharaoh's secrets were close now, wrapped in the silence of the tomb. And Leila knew that whatever lay beyond this chamber, she was ready to face it. The hush in the chamber grew deeper, as if even the air itself had paused to watch. The figure on the dais seemed to loom larger in the wavering light. Its golden mask a cold, impassive gaze that held both welcome and warning. Leila's breath trembled in her chest. She reached out again, her fingers brushing the smooth surface of the mask. Beneath her touch, the air seemed to ripple, a memory awakening after centuries of sleep. The mask's empty eyes stared back at her, and she felt a sudden certainty that the pharaoh's spirit lingered here watching, judging. Omar's voice was low and measured, each word carrying the weight of ancient ritual. "The guardian is more than stone," he said. "It is the soul of the pharaoh's final promise to protect what he held most dear." Leila nodded, her voice a soft echo in the vastness. "Then we must ask permission to pass." She drew in a steady breath and closed her eyes. In the darkness of her mind, she saw the pharaoh not as a statue, but as a man of flesh and spirit, his gaze proud and eternal. She felt the hum of his presence around her, the quiet majesty of a king who had chosen to vanish into legend. "We come in peace, Setepenre," she whispered. "We come to honor you and to learn what was lost to the sands." A soft wind stirred through the chamber, carrying with it the faintest scent of myrrh and something older, the perfume of the afterlife. The golden mask seemed to shimmer in the flickering torchlight, and for a heartbeat, Leila thought she saw the pharaoh's lips curve in a faint, knowing smile. Then, with a low groan of ancient stone, the dais shifted. A crack appeared at its base, a narrow seam of darkness that yawned open like the mouth of the underworld. Yasmin gasped, clutching Leila's arm. "It's opening," she said, her voice a breathless prayer. Omar's eyes were steady, though his knuckles were white on the lantern's handle. "He has granted us passage," he said. "But only if we are worthy." The crack widened, revealing a narrow stairway that spiraled down into the earth. Cold air rushed up to meet them, and Leila shivered. She could feel it, the promise of knowledge, the weight of all that had been buried in silence. She turned to Yasmin and Omar, her voice calm but resolute. "This is the last descent," she said. "The final test of the pharaoh's tomb." Yasmin's eyes were wide with fear, but she nodded. "We're with you, Leila," she said, her voice firm. To the end. Omar's expression was the same calm resolve she had always known. "Lead the way," he said. Leila took the first step, the stone cold beneath her feet. Each step down felt like a journey into the heart of the earth, a heartbeat that had waited millennia to be heard. The darkness grew deeper, but Leila carried the light within her, the light of questions, of wonder, of the unending search for truth. And as they descended into the final depths of the pharaoh's tomb, she felt a quiet certainty settle in her soul that this was more than a journey into the past. It was a promise to the future that the secrets of the Golden Pharaoh would not be lost again. The stairway twisted deep into the earth, each step a testament to the pharaoh's power and mystery. The air grew colder with each turn, the scent of ancient incense clinging to the stone like a ghost of forgotten prayers. Leila's torch flickered and hissed, the flame wavering, but refusing to die. They moved slowly, the silence pressing around them like a shroud. Leila felt each breath in her chest, each heartbeat. An echo of the ancient world that waited below. Yasmin stayed close behind her, her amulet held tight in her fist. Omar moved like a shadow, his lantern casting long, flickering lines along the carved walls. At last, the stairs opened into a chamber, unlike any they had seen before, a vast hall, its ceiling lost in darkness. Columns rose like giants, their surfaces shimmering with veins of gold and lapis, each one carved with the stories of a kingdom long gone. In the center of the room stood an altar of black basalt, its edges inlaid with precious stones that glowed softly in the lantern light. Upon the altar lay a single object, a golden scarab, its wings spread wide, its surface covered in hieroglyphs that seemed to dance in the shifting glow. Leila approached it, her breath caught in her throat. She could feel the pulse of the chamber around her, the weight of every secret that had been buried in silence. "This is the heart of the tomb," she whispered. "The final secret." Omar nodded his eyes, never leaving the scarab. "The heart of the pharaoh," he said. "His spirit and his curse." Yasmin swallowed hard. "What do we do now?" she asked. Her voice trembling, Leila reached out her fingers, brushing the golden scarab. The metal was cold beneath her touch, but there was a warmth beneath it, a memory that had waited centuries to be felt. As her fingers traced the ancient lines, a low hum filled the air. The columns seemed to tremble, and the gold in their veins flickered, like the heartbeat of the tomb itself. Suddenly the air shifted. The walls of the chamber shimmered, the paintings of the pharaoh's triumphs coming alive in the dancing light. She saw visions of Setepenre's reign of battles fought and won, of temples built to honor gods who had long since fallen silent. And then she saw the pharaoh himself, his face serene beneath the weight of a golden crown, his eyes calm and knowing. He raised a hand in silent benediction, and Leila felt the weight of his gaze settle upon her. Setepenre, she breathed her voice a prayer. "What do you want us to see?" The scarab glowed softly beneath her hand, and for a moment the entire chamber seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a soft crack, like the splitting of the earth, a doorway opened in the far wall, a final passage that led deeper still into the true heart of the pharaoh's secrets. Omar stepped forward, his voice steady. "This is it," he said, "the final trial. Beyond this lies the truth and the pharaoh's final judgment." Leila nodded, her fear swallowed by determination. She turned to Yasmin, her voice calm and sure. "Are you ready?" Yasmin took a breath, her eyes wide but resolute. "I'm with you," she said. Leila turned back to the doorway, the darkness beyond it calling to her, like the voice of the past. She took a final breath and stepped forward, her hand on the golden scarab, her heart steady. The truth of the Golden Pharaoh lay ahead, and she would not turn back. The passage beyond the scarab door was narrow, the air thick with the scent of old incense, and something deeper, a scent like ancient earth, rich and unyielding. Their footsteps echoed softly a rhythm that spoke of trespass and discovery. The darkness was absolute, but Leila carried the light of the torch before her, its flame unwavering, even as the weight of the tomb pressed close around them. Each step felt like a heartbeat, a quiet promise that the truth was close. At last, the passage opened into a small circular chamber. The walls were of smooth black stone, their surface polished to a mirror sheen. Carved into them were scenes of Setepenre's life, his coronation beneath the blazing sun, his conquests across the shifting sands, his final prayer to the gods. In the center of the room stood a simple stone pedestal. Upon it rested a single object, a small, intricately carved box of ebony and gold. Its surface was inlaid with symbols of power and protection, the eye of Horus shimmering in the flickering light. Yasmin let out a slow breath, her eyes wide with wonder. "Is this his heart?" she whispered. Leila nodded, her voice a quiet reverence. The pharaoh's final secret. His heart and his soul. Omar moved closer, his lantern casting long shadows across the chamber. "We must be careful," he said softly. "This is the pharaoh's final testament, the truth he took with him to the afterlife." Leila stepped forward, her hands trembling as she reached for the box. The wood was smooth beneath her fingers, cool to the touch as though it had waited centuries for her to find it. She took a deep breath and lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in the soft glow of ancient light, was a single golden amulet, a heart scarab, its surface carved with prayers to guide the soul through the underworld. Around it lay a small scroll, its parchment so old it seemed to tremble with the weight of every word written upon it. Leila's breath caught in her throat. She unrolled the scroll with the gentleness of a prayer, her eyes scanning the faded hieroglyphs. They spoke of the pharaoh's final journey, his choice to vanish from the world of the living, to hide his secrets beneath the sands, so that none might disturb the balance of the earth. He knew she murmured. He knew his time would end, and he chose to become a myth, a guardian of the world's oldest truths. Yasmin's eyes filled with tears. "He gave everything, so that the sands might remember," she said softly. Omar laid a hand on Leila's shoulder. "You have found what you sought," he said. "But the question remains. What will you do with it?" Leila closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the pharaoh's gaze upon her even now. The amulet in her hands felt warm, a pulse of memory and purpose. "I will honor him," she said. "I will tell his story not for glory, but because it deserves to be known." She took the amulet and the scroll, wrapping them in the soft cloth she had brought. As she did, she felt a hush settle over the chamber, a quiet that was not of fear, but of understanding. The pharaoh's secrets had waited long enough. With the amulet safe in her hands, Leila turned back to the doorway. The journey was not over, but she had found the heart of the tomb, and with it, the promise of the past. As they left the chamber of truth, the air felt different. Not just heavy with ancient dust, but somehow lighter, as though the tomb itself had released a long-held breath. The golden amulet rested in Leila's hands, warm and solid, a promise of the pharaoh's final wishes. The passage wound back the way they had come, each step echoing softly in the darkness. Leila felt a quiet reverence in the stillness, as if the pharaoh's spirit walked with them, guiding their return. Yasmin walked close, her eyes still wide with wonder. "Do you think he sees us?" Leila?" she asked softly. "Do you think he approves?" Leila closed her fingers around the amulet, feeling the pulse of history in the cool metal. "I think he knows we came with respect," she said, "that we only wanted to honor his story." Omar led them with a sure, steady step. His lantern cast long shadows against the carved walls, and in the flickering light the paintings of Setepenre seemed to shimmer no longer. Just images, but a living memory. The pharaoh's story, once lost, now had witnesses again. They reached the foot of the stairs that led back to the surface. Leila paused, turning for one last look at the darkness that stretched behind them. The tomb was silent, the air still, but she felt no fear, only a quiet gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered to the shadows. "We will not forget." As they began to climb, the hush of the tomb seemed to give way to the breath of the desert above. The air grew warmer, the scent of sand and sun a promise of the world waiting beyond. At the top of the stairs, dawn was breaking over the dunes. The sky was a pale gold, the first light of morning painting the sands in a glow that seemed to echo the pharaoh's own eternal sun. Leila stepped into the light, the amulet held close to her chest. The desert wind brushed against her face, carrying with it the voices of 1,000 years, whispers of the past of kings and kingdoms, of triumph and loss. Yasmin closed her eyes, lifting her face to the sun. "We did it," she said softly. "We found his heart." Omar nodded, his expression calm and solemn. "And now the world will know the truth of the Golden Pharaoh." Leila felt the weight of the amulet, the promise of the scroll in her satchel. She knew the journey was not truly over, that the stories of the pharaoh would live on in the telling, that the secrets of the sands would become part of the world once more. She turned to her friends, her voice quiet but sure. "Let's go home," she said. "There are stories to tell." And as they set out across the dunes, the desert stretching out before them like a sea of gold, Leila felt the pharaoh's presence in the warmth of the sun, in the hush of the wind, in the silent promise of the sands, that some truths are eternal, and that those who seek them will always find a place in the whispers of antiquity. The journey back across the dunes felt both swift and endless. The weight of what they had found, the pharaoh's secrets, the ancient amulet settled over them like a second sun. The wind whispered around them, carrying with it the songs of the desert echoes of the past and the promise of stories yet to be told. Leila rode in quiet reflection, the golden amulet secure against her heart. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the serene face of Setepenre, the pharaoh who had chosen to become legend rather than be forgotten. She felt a kinship with that decision, the power of choosing one's own legacy. Beside her, Yasmin watched the shifting sands with wide, thoughtful eyes. "Do you think the world is ready to hear his story?" she asked softly. Leila smiled, though her expression was tinged with a quiet wonder. "The world is always ready for stories," she said, "especially those that have waited so long to be told." Omar's gaze was steady as he scanned the horizon. The city of Cairo rising in the distance like a mirage of stone and memory. "Stories change the world," he said. "They remind us of who we are and what we might become." The city's first spires rose out of the haze as the sun climbed higher. Minarets and domes gleamed in the light, a promise of life beyond the sands. Yet as they approached the familiar bustle of Cairo, Leila felt the weight of the tomb pressing softly against her mind, a whisper in the soul, reminding her that the past was never truly gone. The streets of Cairo were alive with color, and sound merchants calling out their wares, the scent of cardamom and roasted lamb in the air. It felt almost unreal, this sudden return to life and laughter after the stillness of the pharaoh's tomb. Leila held the amulet tighter. The quiet heart of a lost king nestled in her hands. She knew what she must do to share his story, not as a relic, but as a living memory. To speak of Setepenre not as a dusty legend, but as a man who had once ruled, once dreamed, once chosen silence over oblivion. They found a quiet courtyard near the museum, the cool shade of a fig tree sheltering them from the heat. Leila unwrapped the amulet and the fragile scroll, laying them before her like offerings. Omar watched her, his voice calm but resolute. "This is only the beginning," he said. "You have carried his story out of the sands. Now you must carry it into the world." Yasmin's eyes were bright with tears. "And we'll carry it with you," she said. "Always." Leila nodded, her heart steady. She took a breath, feeling the weight of every moment that had brought her here. She would not let the pharaoh's silence fade again. She would be the voice he no longer had, the witness to his final testament. And as the city's call to prayer echoed across the rooftops, Leila felt a quiet certainty settle in her chest, that the whispers of antiquity would never truly be silenced, not while there were still those who listened. Days turned into weeks as Leila pored over the pharaoh's scroll and the amulet, each symbol a doorway into a world of shadows and light. She spent long hours in the museum's archives, her fingers tracing hieroglyphs by the glow of a single lamp. The hush of the library felt like the tomb's echoes, a reminder that some truths were never meant to be hurried. Every word she read was a revelation. The scroll spoke of Setepenre's reign, a king who chose to vanish from the world of the living to become legend. It spoke of the final rites of the pharaohs, of the careful weaving of myth and memory to guard the balance of the world. And yet Leila knew that even the oldest stories were not just relics. They were alive, waiting to be heard again. Omar visited her often, bringing cups of strong coffee and the quiet strength of a man who had seen too much to be easily shaken. He watched as she worked, his presence a constant reminder that she was not alone in this journey. "You've become the keeper of his story," he said one evening, his voice gentle in the lamplight, just as he became the keeper of his people's secrets. Leila looked up from the scroll, her fingers still resting on the ancient symbols. "It's more than a story," she said softly. "It's a bridge between what was and what will be." He wanted to be remembered not as a conqueror, but as a guardian of his people's truth. Yasmin joined them, her eyes bright with wonder as she listened to Leila read aloud the pharaoh's words. "You're giving him a voice again," she said. "You're letting the world see the man behind the mask." Leila smiled, though her expression was thoughtful. "And in telling his story, we're finding our own," she said. The city outside moved in its eternal rhythm, the call of the muezzin, the scent of spices in the air, the laughter of children playing in the dusty streets. But within the quiet heart of the museum, time seemed to stand still. Each night, as the stars rose over Cairo, Leila dreamed of the tomb, of the golden mask of Setepenre, of the whispering sands, and the weight of memory. And each morning she woke with a quiet resolve that the pharaoh's story would not be lost again. In the hush of the archives, she began to write not just the tale of a king, but the story of a promise kept across the centuries. Her words became a prayer to the past, a promise to the future. And as the sun rose over the city, painting the domes and minarets in gold, Leila felt a quiet joy in her heart. She was no longer just an Egyptologist. She was a witness, a voice for the forgotten, a keeper of the Golden Pharaoh's final testament. The day of Leila's presentation dawned clear and bright, the city alive with its eternal hum. She stood in the museum's great hall, the ancient amulet nestled in her hands, the scroll resting in a glass case beside her. Scholars and seekers from across the world had gathered to hear her speak, drawn by the promise of a story that had waited centuries to be told. Her heart beat steady and sure. In the hush that settled over the room, she felt the weight of the pharaoh's gaze, not just from the golden mask that watched from its display, but from the silence itself, the echo of all that had been and all that would come. Leila began to speak, her voice calm and clear. She spoke of the tomb hidden beneath the desert sands, of the journey that had taken them beyond the reach of light and into the quiet heart of the earth. She spoke of Setepenre, not as a conqueror, but as a king who had chosen to become legend, to guard the balance of the world with his silence. The hall listened breathless as she read the words of the ancient scroll. The hieroglyphs flowed from her lips like the Nile itself, each word a bridge between the living and the dead. She saw wonder in their eyes, the quiet awe of those who felt the weight of history in their bones. And in that moment, she knew that the pharaoh's story had found its home. When she finished, a hush lingered, a silence that was not of the tomb, but of reverence. Then, slowly, the hall erupted in quiet applause, the sound gentle as the desert wind. Omar stood at the back, his face calm and proud. Yasmin's eyes shone with tears that caught the light like stars. Leila met their gaze and smiled, her own eyes bright with the promise of all that was yet to come. In the days that followed, the world turned its gaze to the Golden Pharaoh once more. Scholars wrote of his reign, artists painted his image, and children listened wide-eyed to the tale of the king who had chosen to vanish into legend. And through it all, Leila remained the quiet keeper of his story, the bridge between the past and the present, the living voice of a world that would never truly be lost. Yet even as the story spread across the world, Leila knew that the truest home of the pharaoh's memory was not in books or lectures. It was in the hush of the desert, in the glow of the sunrise over the dunes, in the quiet spaces where history and memory became one. And each night, as the stars rose over Cairo, Leila would pause in the courtyard of the museum, the amulet warm against her heart. She would close her eyes and feel the desert wind on her skin, the ancient whispers of the pharaoh echoing in the stillness. She would remember the tomb, the guardian's watchful eyes, the hush that had waited for centuries to be broken. And in that memory, she would find not just the story of Setepenre, but the story of all who seek the truth in the silence of the sands. Because in the end, the Golden Pharaoh was more than a king. He was the promise of memory itself, the quiet truth that even in the deepest darkness, the light of a story will always endure.